I pulled into the gravel lot behind the Bastrop Community Center about 10 minutes earlier than I needed to. That was always my habit. Show up early, get a feel for the room, brace for what might come. But tonight wasn't just any room. It was the one filled with the people I'd grown up with, and the ones who had spent the better part of the last decade pretending I didn't exist unless my name made headlines. Inside, the crowd buzzed with that small-town hum, murmurs that carried like wind under the roof of a church. Most of the folks there hadn't spoken to me since I moved to Austin, but now, here they were, eyes scanning me like a stranger. Some offered polite nods, others a half smile laced with confusion, like they didn't know whether to clap or whisper. I was there because I'd been told, by Geneva mostly, that the town wanted to recognize our family's generational legacy, that I'd be asked to say a few words about the company, about making it, about home. I wore navy slacks, a cream blouse, and my quietest pair of heels. I wanted to look polished, but not like I'd outgrown the people who raised me. Still, that intention crumbled when I reached the name table. There it was, printed in curling font, Crosley Whitford. Not my name, not even close. I corrected the woman at the table, but she just blinked and offered a shrug. Guess the printer glitched. Sure. I slid the badge over my shirt without comment and walked into the main room, my chest already tightening like a cord being pulled from both ends. When the host finally called me up, I caught it, the angle of Geneva's chin leaning toward the AV tech. It was subtle, a whisper, followed by a nod. I stepped up, looked out at a sea of familiar faces, and began, "I'm grateful to be back where it all began." Then static. The mic popped, buzzed, then died. I tapped it, paused, tried again. Nothing. The host jogged toward me, hand raised in apology. "We're short on time. Do you mind if we jump ahead?" I stepped aside without protest. The room clapped, out of habit, not meaning. Geneva swept onto the stage with a grin as steady as a lighthouse beam. Her voice echoed crisp and full, thanking our parents for their guidance, the town for its belief in our family, the community for nurturing our dreams. No mention of me, not even a glance. Then came the slideshow. A gold title appeared on screen. "The Pillar of the Whitlock Legacy, Geneva Whitlock Thorne." A framed plaque was brought to the stage, handed to her. I stood off to the side, motionless, a crack forming behind my ribs. Marvel came to me just as the applause crescendoed. She touched my elbow, quick and cold. "It's not about credit, sweetheart," she whispered. "It's about unity." She pressed something into my hand, a small handkerchief embroidered in blue thread. "Forgive quietly." I didn't say a word. The rest blurred. Photo ops, small talk, a line of townspeople waiting to congratulate Geneva. I slipped out before dessert. In the hallway, Geneva caught up with me. "Tough break with the mic," she said, sipping white wine like she hadn't rehearsed that moment a dozen times in front of her mirror. "Next time, just send me your remarks ahead of time. I'll work them in." I looked at her, really looked. The lip gloss, the tailored suit, the rehearsed kindness. I nodded once. This wasn't a celebration, I thought to myself. It was a performance, and I forgot my script. Outside, the night was thicker than I remembered. My heels clicked against the sidewalk as I walked to my car. The applause still echoed faintly through the brick walls behind me. I paused at the driver's door, opened my hand. The handkerchief sat there, crumpled, damp from my own palm. I stared at the thread, at the lie it represented. Then, with my voice barely louder than a breath, I told it the truth. "Forgive quietly, sure, but not today." I didn't need to read the article. The subject line was enough. Geneva Whitlock Thorne, the face behind the family's success. I sat at the kitchen counter, fingers wrapped around a chipped coffee mug I didn't even remember pulling from the cabinet. The link had come from a former colleague, someone who meant well, probably. I clicked anyway. Of course I did. It was all there in serif font and hollow praise. The glowing write-up, the smiling headline photo. Geneva front and center in a fitted blazer I'd seen her wear twice, once to a board meeting she never contributed to, and again at a brunch where she'd called me over-focused. My name wasn't in the article, not once. The writer referred vaguely to her younger sister's tech savvy, like I was a myth. A convenient footnote. In the photo, I was standing behind Geneva, blurred, mid-clap, mouth half open like I'd just finished a sentence that nobody cared to hear. I stared at that photo longer than I should have. Then I did something petty. I screenshotted it, cropped everything out except me, hazy, sidelined, and emailed it to myself with the subject line, "In case I ever forget." There's this quote I read once. When they can't own your success, they'll pretend it was always theirs. It stuck with me, and right then, it felt more like a prophecy than a platitude. I closed the tab and opened Facebook, more out of reflex than interest. That's when I saw it. A fundraiser, launched by my mother. The banner photo, me again. This time from an old speaking engagement in Dallas. I was in profile, frowning slightly, caught mid-thought. The kind of picture you'd never post unless you wanted the person to look cold or tired. Caption: Our family struggles quietly, even while our youngest forgets where she came from. Goal: $10,000. Reason: urgent repairs to the family home after years of neglect and financial hardship. I had offered to pay for those repairs 6 months ago. Sent the estimate. Offered to hire a contractor. No one responded. I clicked on the donation list. A dozen familiar names. People I'd shared Sunday potlucks with. People who used to wave when I mowed the front lawn. People who never asked for my side. I didn't cry. That would have given it too much weight. I just closed the laptop, firm and final, like I was sealing something inside. The truth: this wasn't new. The Whitlock story always had a cast. Geneva, the golden child. Marvel, the long-suffering matriarch. Eldon, the quiet backbone. And me, at best, the punchline. At worst, the liability. Any time I'd tried to tell a different version, one where I was more than the outsider, they called it drama, division, selfishness. I thought about that voicemail, the one I never deleted. "Don't stir things up, baby," Marvel had said. "It's not worth the trouble. Let Geneva handle it." She always got to handle it. Even now, with my words, my work, my image being used to raise money, I could hear the unspoken rule: stay small, stay silent. And here's the thing: they were smart. They never hit me, never cursed me out. They just rewrote me. I opened my laptop again. This time, not for revenge, not yet, just to remember. News clips, screenshots, payment records, copies of emails I wasn't supposed to save. I made a folder on my desktop, named it "Just in Case," because I wasn't planning on fighting. But then again, I wasn't planning on disappearing either. Around 9 that night, just as I was pouring another cup of coffee I didn't need, my phone buzzed. An email notification, scheduled for publication tomorrow. Title: Meet the Real Brains Behind the Business. And just below it, a quote from Geneva. 3 days after the article went viral, a certified envelope arrived. Brown, creased at the corners, and forwarded from my family's address. My father's handwriting on the front. Slanted, heavy like he carved the ink into the paper. I opened it standing by the kitchen counter. Inside was a single-page letter. A debt acknowledgement form. It claimed I had borrowed $42,000 from my parents to cover tuition and living expenses during college, plus interest, listed at 4.6% annually. The bottom was signed, Crosby Whitlock. Only, it wasn't my signature. Not even close. The loops were too high, the slant too right. I'd been writing my name the same way since I was 15. There was no mistaking it. I stood there holding the page for a while. It didn't hit all at once. It came in slow, like a steady leak under a floorboard. At first, you barely noticed the dampness. Then you step through. How long had they been planning this? I folded the paper neatly and placed it on the table. Then sat down in front of my laptop, opened the folder named Just in Case, and added a new subfolder, Debt Claim. No part of me thought this was about money. This was legal prep, groundwork, a tactic. They weren't just painting me ungrateful, they were preparing to call me a thief. I started digging through old receipts, records, tax files. Nothing matched that number. No memo, no check stub. And then I remembered. My sophomore year, my dad had driven down to Austin. Just showed up with a check. said, "You've done right by us. No strings." I believed him. Now I wondered if he ever meant it, or if even then he was planning a return. There was this phrase my old mentor used to say, "If they lie about you long enough, even you'll start to wonder." And she was right. Because for a moment there, I did. Not whether it was true, but whether they believed it enough to make it real. I scanned the forged signature, saved a copy, then typed a short summary of the timeline so far: the fundraiser, the press article, the recognition event, the fake debt, all lining up neatly in a straight line towards something much worse. Later that afternoon, Declan called. His voice was sharper than usual, tight, like someone trying to keep from letting too much through. "I saw the fundraiser," he said, "and the press stuff." "Yeah," I replied. "It's been a week." He hesitated, then added, "I never told you this, but years ago, my mom said your mother told her you were an ungrateful liability. I didn't believe it at the time." I sat down on the couch. "And Geneva?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "She told a few of our mutuals that you'd borrowed ideas, that you were strategic with attribution, whatever the hell that means." I exhaled slowly, no tears, no sharp words. I just said, "Do you still have any of that in writing?" "I'll look." "Probably buried in old messages." "Okay, thanks for telling me. I wish it hadn't taken this much." We hung up quietly. I didn't move for a while, just sat there and let it settle. Not grief, not even anger, really. Just the strange kind of stillness that comes when the last piece of the puzzle stops being a surprise. I went back to the laptop, pulled together every financial statement I had, bank transfers to my parents, screenshots of messages about rent, groceries, support. I opened a spreadsheet and started filling in dates, notes, tags, categories. This wasn't about emotions anymore, not tonight. This was about evidence. They had rewritten me. Now it was my turn to keep a record they couldn't touch. At the bottom of the spreadsheet, I added a note to myself. I've spent years trying to prove I wasn't the problem. It's time to prove they were. Before shutting down for the night, I opened a blank email. To Vaughn Arquette. Subject: Consultation. Family Financial Misconduct. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. Then finally, I typed 2 words. "Let's begin." And hit send. The email had been short, Geneva's way of pretending she didn't need to explain anything. "Just dinner. Everyone wants to clear the air. Friday night, 6 p.m. It didn't fool me. Not for a second. Still, I drove. Not for peace, not for reconciliation, just to see if they'd actually say what I knew they were thinking. Sometimes clarity is the only thing worth the gas. The house hadn't changed. Fresh paint on the shutters. Same porch swing that creaked like it held secrets. It looked clean, controlled, empty in a way no amount of warm lighting could fix. Marvel greeted me with that tight smile she always used when company came over. The one that didn't reach her eyes. "You look tired, baby. Are you eating enough?" Eldon offered a nod from behind his glasses and a sip of his beer. Not a word. Geneva was already seated at the table like a judge waiting for the case to begin. Wine glass in hand, legs crossed, mouth set in a smile so calm it felt loaded. I sat across from her and didn't bother with pleasantries. Dinner started with small talk, Geneva talking about her recent podcast feature, Marvell chiming in that a neighbor saw her face on the local news. I chewed, nodded, didn't say much, until Geneva leaned back, glanced at Eldon, and said casually, "You know what'd be a smart move, Cross? Transferring a portion of the company into Mom and Dad's names. It's clean, it's tax efficient, it protects the family." Eldon chimed in like this was all spontaneous. "Just a formality. Everyone wins." And Marvel, bless her, looked me dead in the face and said, "Think of it as honoring where you came from." I set my fork down, wiped my mouth. Let the silence stretch long enough for Geneva's smile to twitch. Then I said it. No one's getting paper on something they didn't build. Geneva's expression didn't crack, but her eyes narrowed like she'd expected me to fold, expected me to feel guilty, like success was a sin they let me commit. Nobody responded. We ate in silence after that. I waited for a pivot, And when it came, it was mine. I updated my will, I said flatly. I've earmarked part of the company to fund a legal empowerment program for women. More silence. No congratulations, no follow-up. Just Geneva shifting in her seat and Eldon clearing his throat to ask how traffic was getting into town. That moment told me more than words ever could. Silence is how my family disapproves, not with anger, with absence. I finished my wine slowly, watching Geneva pretend she wasn't burning behind her glass. I didn't bring the will up again, not because I doubted myself, but because the verdict had already been given. After dessert, which none of us touched, Marvel walked me to the door, handed me a plastic bag with foil containers inside. I packed you some of the green beans, she said with a tone that mimicked care. Figured you'd forget to eat later. I took it, thanked her, and walked out. But I didn't get in the car right away. I placed the bag on the porch bench, didn't say a word. The drive back to Austin was quiet. No music, no calls, just the kind of quiet that wraps around you when you realize there's nothing left to say. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, the streetlights had kicked on. I parked, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my keys in the dish. The apartment smelled like lavender and printer toner. I liked it that way. Then my phone buzzed. New email. Subject: Preliminary document draft. Geneva Whitlock Thorne. No name in the sender line. Didn't need one. I knew exactly who had pushed the send button. The document hit my inbox around 8:37 a.m. I was sitting at the dining table, drinking weak coffee and watching the neighbor across the courtyard wrestle a bag of mulch into the back of his truck. I wasn't expecting anything official that morning, but there it was. Subject: Notice of estate restructuring. The file came from a law office in town. One I recognized. Geneva had used them before, when she bought her second rental property and needed someone to look over the language. I opened the PDF, and before I even made it to the second paragraph, I felt it. Not anger, not yet, just heat. Geneva and Marvell were now listed as co-beneficiaries of a property I'd purchased 5 years ago with my own post-tax money. No loans, no joint names, nothing to confuse the line. And there was my name, spelled wrong again. Digital signature included. A forgery, but a lazy one. The kind of error someone makes when they think you'll never look. I didn't scream. But my hands curled tight enough to crack my knuckles. I highlighted every line, screenshot each page. Then I opened my email, sent one line to my accountant. Tell me how illegal this is. I stared at the document for a few more seconds before whispering to no one. They didn't even care enough to fake it well. I spent the next hour checking the property registry. 3 entries in the past year, one claiming I had gifted the property to the Whitlock Family Trust. The paperwork showed signatures dated during a week I'd been out of the country. It wasn't sloppy. It was coordinated. I called Vaughn. He picked up after the first ring. They've already filed the transfer, I said. He asked for the file. I sent it. Silence on the other end for a beat too long. Then, you have more grounds than you think. I didn't reply. Just opened my desktop folder and renamed it. Evidence, not memories. We scheduled a meeting for the next day. But Vaughn asked me to start prepping something else. Pull every transaction you've ever made in support of your parents. Checks, bank transfers, gift cards, whatever you've got. We'll show a pattern of financial support. It's time to treat this like a trial. I spent that night digging. 4 years' worth of mortgage supplements, pharmacy receipts, screenshots of monthly cash app transfers labeled things like groceries and utilities, birthday checks, emergency dental. I found emails from Marvel, short, clipped, but always with a thank you. I pulled it all together and sent it to Vaughn. A few minutes later, he messaged back. Legally, this is gold. Emotionally, I'm sorry they ever made you collect it. I stared at the screen, thought about it for a while before replying. They made me feel guilty for not doing enough. Turns out, they just weren't counting what didn't benefit them. That night, I didn't ask myself if I was overreacting. That voice had been quiet for days now. What filled the space instead was something calmer and harder. I wasn't looking for reconciliation anymore. I set up a call with a forensic accountant. Not because Vaughn asked, but because I wanted the audit trail, wanted the receipts lined up like dominoes, ready to fall when I pushed. After printing everything, I sat on the edge of my bed, pages spread across the floor like puzzle pieces. One of them slipped behind my printer. When I bent down to reach it, my hand brushed something soft. The handkerchief. Forgive quietly. I stared at it for a while, then folded it again, tighter than before, and slid it back behind the machine. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending they didn't try to destroy me. At 11:14 that night, Vaughn sent one last message. This isn't about money anymore. It's a full-scale attempt to discredit you. And Geneva's not done. 3 days after I sent the files to Vaughn, the bank called. Not a branch I usually dealt with, one across town I hadn't set foot in for years. The woman on the line said she was from their fraud department. Friendly voice. Measured tone. Ms. Whitlock, we have a flagged loan application tied to your name, and we just need to verify a few details before we process it. I told her I hadn't applied for anything. She hesitated. It appears to be a business loan, she continued, signed 2 months ago. You're listed as the primary applicant, with Eldon Whitlock and Geneva Whitlock Thorne as co-signers. My jaw clenched. I told her I'd be there in 40 minutes. At the branch, the paperwork was already on the desk, stapled, highlighted. My name on the top line, but not my handwriting. The same misspelling from the estate document. They were getting bolder. The bank manager offered to handle it quietly. Suggested I might prefer an internal review. No, I said. File the fraud report. I want a paper trail, starting now. I signed the complaint form and requested copies of everything. They weren't just using my name, I thought, walking out of the bank. They were betting I wouldn't catch it. On the ride home, I called Vaughn. He didn't sound surprised. We're not filing this one quietly either, he said. Go ahead and start the complaint with the state. I'll begin the cease and desist letter now. I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. By the time I got back to the apartment, the form was open. I started filling it out with the same hands that used to shake when my mother said, "Don't make this worse than it already is." Geneva had once told me years ago, "You're the smart one, but smart doesn't matter if no one listens to you." I hadn't forgotten. She wanted disbelief to do her dirty work, not this time. Later that evening, while prepping the rest of the documentation, I got a text from Rowan. "Hey, what's going on?" Someone posted about me. I froze, checked my notifications. Then the forums. A blog post had gone live under a fake account. The real reason she succeeded. It claimed Rowan had secretly bankrolled my company with laundered money from a defunct nonprofit we once consulted for. The post was shared in 3 local groups, 2 of which were moderated by Geneva's husband. I called Vaughn. "We traced the metadata," he said. "It links back to a device used in Geneva's firm. Nothing direct, but enough." I called Rowan next. Apologized before she could say anything. She didn't sound angry. "I always knew they'd come for me," she said. "I just didn't know they'd wait this long." She paused. "You okay?" "No," I replied. "But I'm clear." After the call, I opened my folder titled, "Just in Case." Then I deleted it. Replaced it with a new one. Now it's war. I called Declan. Asked him for every message, email, note he still had. I wrote out a full timeline, starting from the fake debt note to the fundraiser, to the forged signature at the bank, and now, slander against the people who meant something to me. I didn't do it for sympathy. I did it to make sure the next lie would trip over the last one. I stared at the last entry and wrote in bold, "If I let this go now, I become the woman who let herself be rewritten, and I refuse." I opened a new Word doc, centered the title, "Statement for Release." Then I hit record on the webcam. "My name is Crosby Whitlock," I said into the lens. "And here's what they don't want you to know. 2 days after I recorded my statement, I hit post. I uploaded the video to my firm's page. Short caption, "What they tried to erase, I'm reclaiming." I didn't script it. I didn't rehearse. Just sat in front of the camera and told the truth about the forged documents, the fundraiser, the silencing, the rewriting. "This isn't revenge," I said near the end. "This is restoration." I closed the tab and went to make coffee. By the time I came back, the video had a dozen comments, then 50, then hundreds. Some were from clients. Others were from women I'd never met, sharing their own family fractures, siblings who'd stolen inheritances, parents who'd used guilt like a mortgage they expected you to repay. They wanted silence, I thought, watching the shares climb. They got visibility. That night, a message came from Vaughn. He'd just received a heads up from a contact at the Secretary of State's office. A filing had come through earlier that day. Geneva listed as active director, Marvel as majority owner. My name once again left off the registration. I called Vaughn immediately. How fast can we freeze the file? I've already submitted the motion, he said. They tried to beat you to the punch. We're stopping it in process. I leaned back in my chair, let the weight of it settle. They thought I'd break, I told him. I filed a freeze instead. After we hung up, I opened my inbox. There, buried under a dozen notifications, was an email from a name I didn't recognize. No message, just an attachment. It was a video file from the award event. I hit play. Geneva, leaning over the AV tech. A whisper. A nod. 10 seconds later, my mic cuts out. Another clip, different angle. This one from a phone camera. The presenter, reading off names, skips mine entirely, moves straight to Geneva's. I stared at the screen for a long time, then opened my video editor. I stitched that clip with the one I'd already posted. He overlaid the footage with my original words. No dramatics, no music, just facts. I uploaded it with one line. Here's the full story. By morning, it had over 1 million views. The hashtags took off first. Hashtag silent no more. Hash family fraud. Hash reclaim the mic. By noon, advocacy groups were resharing it. Blogs picked it up. Then local news. People didn't just watch, they remembered. They reached out. Some angry, some relieved, some just saying, "Thank you for speaking when I couldn't." I didn't feel triumphant. Not really. I felt tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that comes after years of holding your breath and finally letting it out. I turned off notifications and let the silence stretch. Rowan messaged me. They messed with the wrong one. Finally, the world knows. I smiled at the screen, then closed it. I didn't do this for applause, I thought. I did it to stop disappearing. Late that night, I checked my email again. One new message. No greeting, no punctuation. You really think this will go the way you planned? It was from Geneva. I didn't respond, but I did reread it, twice, and I smiled. The door clicked behind me as I stepped into Vaughn's office. No suits, no small talk, just a quiet table, 3 chairs, one laptop already open, facing the wall. A forensic accountant sat on Vaughn's right. Her glasses were down her nose, hair tied back like she'd been working since sunrise. Vaughn nodded toward the seat in front of them. We've got enough to file. I sat. They pulled up the file. Timeline, transactions, signatures, screen recordings. Vaughn walked me through each one with that voice he used when it wasn't about emotion anymore, just facts and law. This isn't just breach of trust, he said. It's structured misrepresentation, multiple counts. I didn't interrupt, didn't ask what happens next, because I already knew. The IRS regional agent joined via video. He listened carefully, asked 3 questions, then leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers under his chin. If this is real, he said, someone's getting handcuffs. I didn't flinch. I just nodded once. Let them call it dramatic, I thought. I call it discovery. By 4 p.m., the filing was in. I signed the complaint under oath. Vaughn looked at me across the table and said, "They'll try to flip the narrative before the fallout lands." I nodded again. But this time, I didn't post, didn't hint, didn't even breathe it aloud. This time, I let the system speak louder than I ever could. That night, while I was back home organizing receipts for Vaughn's office, a message popped up on my screen. From Declan, no subject, just an audio file. I hit play, background noise, a fork scraping a plate. Then her voice, Geneva. "She'll never fight us," she said. "She's too clean." We just bleed her slowly. A pause. Eldon replied, "That inheritance? It's ours. She's just holding it." My spine stiffened. My breath didn't catch, but it got heavier. I played it twice. No need for three. I forwarded it to Vaughn and the IRS agent. 10 minutes later, Vaughn texted back, "This just changed everything." The next morning, Eldon's bank accounts were frozen. IRS subpoenas went out that same afternoon. He refused to comply. 2 hours after that, I got the call. "Your father's in custody." Geneva, of course, issued a statement within hours. "She's devastated. She had no knowledge of any misconduct. She believes in family above all else." Sure, I didn't say anything publicly. I posted one line. Silence doesn't mean absence. Sometimes it's preparation. Later that night, I stood in my kitchen, lights dim, floor quiet under my bare feet. I opened the drawer where I'd stashed the handkerchief. "Forgive quietly." I held it in my hand for a moment, then folded it, one tight corner at a time. "I did forgive," I wrote in my journal. Then I pursued the truth anyway. Around 11:50 p.m., another message came in. Subject: Petition to remove Crosby Whitlock as legal beneficiary. Filed by Geneva's attorney. I stared at the screen, didn't blink, didn't sigh, just closed the laptop and said out loud, to no one, "She's still playing." I didn't go to the hearing, didn't sit in the hardback chair, didn't watch the clerk shuffle papers or hear Geneva's attorney say my name like it was a technicality. Vaughn went for me, sent me the judge's ruling in an email titled simply, "Final Order." I read it while sipping coffee at the kitchen table. "Petition denied," it said, citing fraudulent documentation, financial coercion, and ongoing IRS investigation. That was it. No fanfare, no applause. Just the silence I was owed from the start. I forwarded it to my accountant with 3 words. "Close the file." I didn't feel victorious. Not exactly, just still. The kind of still that comes when a noise you didn't realize had been buzzing for years finally stops. The fallout came quietly. A few days later, people I hadn't heard from in years popped up in my inbox. I had no idea. "We were misled. I'm sorry." I didn't reply to any of them, not out of bitterness, but because there wasn't anything left to say. Rowan sent an orchid, white and quiet. The note tucked beneath it read, "You never needed vindication, but you earned it anyway." I placed it by my desk, next to the old family photo, the one I'd folded in half months ago. Geneva's half face down now. I stared at it for a moment and said to myself, "I'm not angry anymore, just done." Later that week, I found the handkerchief while cleaning out a drawer. "Forgive quietly," it still said. The last time I'd touched it was the night they cut my mic. I held it again, folded it slow, and dropped it into the donation box without a word. Forgiveness wasn't the finish line. Peace was. A month passed. I launched the Whitlock Initiative quietly. No launch party, no interviews. Just a clean website and a single mission: legal aid for women facing financial abuse inside their own families. I spoke at a small event in a neighboring town, one where no one asked me about Bastrop or the past or who I used to be. The organizer mispronounced my name. I smiled and corrected them gently. People will keep getting it wrong, but I'll keep showing up anyway. Back home, I didn't delete the folder labeled Evidence, Not Memories. I just encrypted it and moved it off my desktop. I didn't reconcile. Didn't need to. Healing, I've learned, isn't always a circle. Sometimes, it's a line you walk forward on, without looking back. There's a quote I wrote on a sticky note above my desk. "Not everything broken needs fixing. Some things just need leaving." That's where I left it. Justice came, but it didn't fix me. I fixed myself. And maybe that was the point. As I stepped out of the community center that afternoon, a little girl walked up with a handmade card, crayon scribbles, stars, and flowers. Inside it said, "You helped my mom." I thanked her, tucked the card in my bag, and walked to my car. The sky above was wide and clean. Sometimes, legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you choose not to carry forward.